I'm happy to be performing cello on the upcoming December 4th Odyssey concert. With my wife Maria on harp, we'll be performing a couple of pieces, but I want to talk to you today about the most important work I think that we're going to play, the Louange à l'éternité de Jésus by Olivier Messiaen. Messiaen was born in 1908 and became the most important composer, teacher, artist, pedagogue, ornithologist. He was a unique personality, but above all, he was a devout Catholic. And so most of his works have spiritual meanings and spiritual connections, as does this work that we're going to perform. The Louange, or the in praise of the eternity of Jesus, is the fifth movement of an 8-movement work, the Quartet for the End of Time, which gets its title from the book of Revelation. In the 10th chapter of the book of Revelation, there is a vision of the angels of the apocalypse. And the angel which I saw stand upon the sea and upon the earth lifted up his hand to heaven, and swear by him that liveth for ever and ever, that there should be time no longer. Thus the title, Quartet for the End of Time. The 8 movements are varied in character, from highly rhythmic and extraordinarily difficult to ecstatic, as this cello movement is called. The 4 performers in the original premiere came about and came together after being captured and sent to a Silesian prisoner of war camp. Messiaen had bad eyesight and was already exempted from service, but they were fortunate to be sent to a camp where a lot of help was granted to them through the commandant and through some camp orderlies. Messiaen was given paper, a violin was found, a piano was donated by the commandant. In fact, this prisoner of war camp that held 30,000 prisoners was certainly not like our vision of an Auschwitz or the general prisoner of war camps as part of Nazi Germany. But nevertheless, over the 8 months that they were there, they must have seen many atrocities, and this work had an extraordinary impact on the 500 prisoners who attended the first performance on January the 14th, 1941, almost exactly 80 years ago. The movement, as I said, for cello and piano, or we have arranged it for piano and for cello and harp, is called In Praise of the Eternity of Jesus. And the most important thing is about how slow it is. In fact, the tempo marking that Messiaen gives us at the beginning is called infinitely slow and ecstatic. Now, I don't want to belabor you with tempo marking, but the tempo marking, for those of you who are interested, is 16th note, which is a very fast note, equals 40. Now, 40 means that each note in this piece is more than a second long. The important thing about this piece as you listen to it is the fact that the cello melody is an endless melody at the very top of its register. In fact, the cello doesn't stop playing. The harp plays the role of triadic chords vertically lined up. So we have a horizontal melody that is ecstatic in nature and exceptionally slow, and completely vertical chords. Each chord moves to another chord that sometimes we might expect, but in general we do not. Messiaen's harmony was extraordinarily robust and different from the rest of the world. And so one of the exciting things about listening to this piece is try to imagine where the harmony is going. As I said, it is ecstatic, which might be a spiritual ecstasy, but the infinite and slow nature of this is certainly spiritual in nature. Certainly I can imagine the impact it had on performers and listeners alike. So we hope that you're going to enjoy this work in its glory, its ecstasy, its devoutness, and your first perhaps experience of the music of the French composer, teacher, pedagogue, Olivier Messiaen.
Hi there, my name's Alison Robuck, and Peter and I will be performing on Odyssey's next concert, Holiday Sparkles. We're going to be performing a piece for oboe and piano as a sonatina by Grażyna Baczewicz, and she's a Polish composer who lived during the 20th century. She lived in Warsaw, Poland. She was born there in 1909 and lived through World War II in Poland, and then she passed away in 1969. She was a violinist and a composer, and she studied not only at the Warsaw Conservatory, but also traveled to Paris to study with Nadia Boulanger, and then after her studies she returned to Warsaw and remained there during the war and for the rest of her life. Some of her pieces were not published during her lifetime, including the one we're performing tonight, which wasn't published until 1988 in Warsaw. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what you'll be hearing and why we want to share this piece with you. One of the reasons was it was going to be featured on the women's concert in May, when we were going to have an entire program devoted to women composers. And we wanted to bring it through to this season in December for you, because they're celebrating the 19th Amendment of women's suffrage. We thought it would be a wonderful opportunity to perform pieces by women composers. This particular piece is in the neoclassical style, which will feature things from earlier music such as Mozart's style in the classical era, even though she's a modern composer. So I thought I would just share a couple of the things from the piece from the oboe perspective of what to listen for that's sort of fun to find. The first thing is, in classical music, many times the 16th note technical passages would spin along until a trill, and then the phrase would end on a cadential point after the trill, and the trill would sort of highlight the ending point of the phrase, if not the entire piece. So what she does in a neoclassical style is she begins the piece with a trill. So the oboe part begins like this. Instead of ending, she begins. Another idea that she takes from classical style that would have been maybe even more of a Baroque style is ornamentation. And something in ornamentation would be something called a turn, which you have the principal note and the notes that ornament around it turn around the principal note. So if the note is a C, you might turn up for a D, back to the C, down to a B natural, and up to the C. So a lot of times in Baroque music, the oboist has music that has turns in it that's within the staff, something like. But what she does is she takes it up the staff, up above the staff, into a higher range, which wouldn't have necessarily been found in the Baroque era. And instead of just ornamenting around one note, she makes it melodic material. So at one point you'll hear this when Peter and I are performing, which is just really fun to play. Another facet of this that makes it a little more modern, which would be not like the classical style, is that she consistently varies the tempo structurally. So she has two tempi for this piece. Different melodic material goes with each separate tempo. The opening tempo is how I played with the trills in that turn. And then the second tempo slows down just a little bit, but offers grace notes within the melodic line. And some of them are written as grace notes and some of them are written as sort of upper neighbors, but it still has the idea of what a Baroque melodic line would feel like. The second movement is a canon, which is like a round. Peter will start with a melody and I'll repeat it. And the third movement is with two different tempi again, but this time different meters. And so it'll go back and forth in this modern style of duple meter, which is either a simple duple or compound duple, where there's 3 eighth notes to the beat, and it's just wonderful to hear those 2 separate spots. So I'm going to play just the start of the 3rd movement, which begins in simple duple. And it just sort of has a real up and down feel. And then the next part will be the 6/8. It's just really playful and fun, and I hope you'll enjoy it.
Hi, my name is Kyle Stegall.
And I'm Holly Piccoli.
And we are here to talk to you about our parts in the upcoming Odyssey Chamber Music Series concert.
The concert will be next Friday, and we've already started rehearsals. I'm playing this most beautiful piece by Chausson. It is called Poem, and it is originally for violin with orchestra, but it also was written for violin and piano, and I'll be playing with the formidable Ayako Tsuruta.
And I'll also be performing with Miss Tsuruta. I am taking part in a set of songs by Gustav Holst, and it's actually 2 sets combined. We are performing Holst's Opus 35, which is written for violin and voice, and we're interspersing it with Holst's Opus 16, which is for piano and voice.
Kyle and I have played the Holst before a couple of times, and coming back to it a couple of years later, it has different meaning, perhaps because we've all had to slow down with the pandemic, and we've taken this time to really think about what the text means. But also I've noticed that within the writing for the violin part, it uses really perfect intervals, like perfect fifths, perfect fourths, and has this sort of spacious quality. Perfect for a church, like where we'll be playing.
Right.
And perfect to just linger and take the time in the sound.
Yeah, I really like that. It's not just the coming back and re-examining the text, but also re-examining the texture. It's written for, it was inspired by Holst hearing one of his students accompanying herself on violin, is that right?
Yeah, she was playing violin in a very resonant church and singing at the same time, and of course she was a soprano, not a tenor. So the register that she sang in was, I suppose, an octave higher than what you'll sing in, but
But that examination of music in isolation, right? Holst happens upon somebody playing music with themselves and for themselves, and he turned that into inspiration and played with it in this set. The set is 4 texts of medieval Christian poetry. And so it's in Old English, but it's been slightly modernized in order to help us, 21st century Missourians understand it.
yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to be starting, so there are 4 songs in that set. We're starting with song number 1 and then fitting a couple of pieces from Opus 16 in, then number 2 from the violin and voice cycle, then 2 more from Opus 16, then 3, then 2 more, and then ending with Holly and I singing and playing.
It has quite a haunting ending, that one. Starts with a violin motif, and then both voices join together, but almost doing very different things from each other. And as the violin peters out, it's just left with this major third, and it's sort of the first real moment of like clarity and majorness,
Yeah.
happiness.
That word majorness is interesting, because everything we hear Holst's love for modality in both of these sets, Opus 16 and Opus 35. I'd say Opus 16 is more what we would term a cycle, because there's so much that sort of ties it together, including that all of these texts sort of point towards the Nativity. Nothing outright, but it kind of, if you're available to it, bring your mind to the stillness and sort of haunting nature of the Nativity. I'm just taking a look at the text here while we're talking and the set order, and what we've taken Opus 16 or Opus 35 out of order to help kind of bring a through line to the sort of Frankenstein set that we've put together. I'm so excited about this. You said that the final piece of Opus 16 starts with violin and then we join in voice. Oh, Opus 35, sorry. And so too does the first piece. So that's another way that it's really cyclical and exciting in this way. I wanted to share a quote of Holst's that I really relate to, especially, as Holly was saying, in this time of isolation and sort of introspection. So this is a quote I've always really related to of Holst's. He said, "I believe very strongly that we are largely the result of our surroundings, and that we never do anything alone. Everything that is worth doing is the result of several minds playing on each other." And as an artist, I find this to be always true, but especially in these past few months, nearly a year now, I've come back to this notion over and over, that when I'm singing, I'm not just me, right? I'm a singer, and I am representing a poet who may or may not be with us anymore, and I'm giving voice to a composer's imagination, and I am equal parts me and the ensemble with which I'm engaging. And I'm thrilled to concentrate on pieces that help us live in that perspective. And also just happy to be a part of a chamber music series that really focuses on that intimacy of connection, that intimacy of sort of interpretation and human experience.
Yeah. Ayako and I first met when we were performing, or rather preparing for a performance in July of this year. And Ayako talked about the chanson poem and was surprised that I hadn't played it. And I am surprised I haven't played it, because it is a masterwork for the violin. It's like a pillar of the repertoire, and as well as it being totally beautiful and virtuosic, it's sort of a rite of passage piece, and I'm surprised to have never played it. And I feel like at this point in my life experience, it'll mean a lot, perhaps more than if I was still a student.
Are you glad that you didn't start it when you were younger?
Only that I can freshly come to the music with my own mind and not be maybe swayed by someone else's fingers or someone else's bowing ideas. Although you always listen to different recordings to hear what people are inspired to do. But definitely on first reading of this for me, I had my own fresh eyes and ears for the music. It's a hearty piece to play. Chanson's music is somewhere beautifully between romantic and impressionist. He was, unfortunately, he died really early and sort of at the burst of his career. And so that's maybe why we haven't got as much repertoire from him. But this piece lives on for sure. He was friends with the legendary violinist Eugene Izai, who has these remarkable solo violin sonatas. And the opening is very reminiscent of that. And in fact, Szegedy, another violinist, Szegedy, questioned whether the beginning was either influenced or maybe even written by Izai, since Izai was the premier performer for the piece. And later Izai said, yes, on top of what Chausson had created, I embellished it by creating two voices rather than a single voice. He created two contrapuntal voices for the violin alone.
Wow, that's really something like this time period for us as well. You know, this we've been asked more and more to, you know, make music with each other, with one person laying down one track, and then, you know, another person coming in and laying down another track. And while that's not really the at the heart or the nature of actual chamber music, your description just really fits beautifully into our current times.
Yeah, and the music is very relevant, because you can always find something in music, but maybe my advice for someone who's never heard it before is to experience it from start to finish without looking for a structure, because actually it is very loose in its structure. It's not like a sonata form or a rondo. Really, the main thing tying it together is this haunting melody that you hear in the beginning, and it comes back. And then the impressionism effects are soaring arpeggios and whirlwind scales, and then this is all paired with wonderful things similarly on the piano. And so just let it wash over you and try and think about what you're hearing and how it makes you feel. Or maybe listen to it on YouTube before the concert if you'd like to be more familiar with it.
I guess I'd like us to take a chance to say that same idea for the Holst set. Do you have ideas of how you would recommend people listen to it who've maybe never heard it? Oh, and by the way, it's very likely that even if you're an art song fan, these songs, this may be the first time you hear them. The songs for voice and violin are not performed that often because there just isn't a lot of repertoire there for voice, violin, no piano, no orchestra, no continuo, just voice and violin. So this is just a really rare opportunity for us to program it. And the Opus 16 set is exceptionally rare. It was hard for Ayako and I to get our hands on. So we're just thrilled to be doing it. So think of yourselves as experiencing it for the first time with the three of us. You know, this will certainly be our first performance of it in this setup. I would say, sort of similar to what Holly says about the Chausson, if you can listen to each of the 10 pieces as a little miniature meditation, and just sort of let that color come into your world for 60 to 120 seconds, that might be the best way to experience this. If you get a chance to read the texts ahead of time, I would really recommend you do it so you can kind of see the way we've taken that nativity idea and played with it. But yeah, I think...
Well, one extra step, if you're musically inclined and you'd like to see the sheet music, it's available online for free. And one of the interesting things to see visually is that no measure has the same number of beats necessarily. There's no 4/4 time, there's no 3/4 time in the Holst for violin and voice. And in that way, that's the impression of timelessness
Yeah.
that you can create for yourself while you're singing and playing. So it's interesting to just look at the score for that reason as well.
Absolutely. And in that way, he can bend these very ancient words to, singular or building gestures. And
Very freely.
And ultimately, these two voices become one in really poignant moments. Just really brilliantly written music. We're thrilled to get to perform together.
And we're thrilled in general to be able to perform because, of course, with the pandemic, a lot of concerts have been cancelled, and the fact that this one will go ahead with a small distanced audience wearing masks means that at the end of the performance, we'll have people that we've shared the moment with.
Both
in
online
person,
and in person, yeah.
Online and in person, and we're really thrilled for that opportunity.
Absolutely.
We hope you join us next Friday.
Thanks for spending some time with us.
Thanks.